Keep pushing that boulder to the top of the hill. Welcome one and all to Suckville.
Extraordinary stories from ordinary humans? Yes, please. This is Live from Suckville. I'm your host, Silva Florence, an expat, writer, cyclist, and podcaster, currently laid up in Suckville after losing my apartment in a flood. You have the power to heal your life, and you need to know that. We think so often that we are helpless, but we're not. We always have the power of our minds. Claim and consciously use your power. This was Louise L. Hay who said this. She was an American motivational speaker, author. She opened Hay House, publishing house. Many people also describe her as a healer, as a teacher. Now, my question to all of you out there is, what is healing? Where does it come from when we are physically or mentally sick? Is it, or does it have to be, always doctors, nurses, hospitals, and contemporary medicine? Which I'm not discounting in the least. Or like Louise L. Hay and my guest today, Thorfin Skullcrusher, which is not his given name, it's his now name. Is it like they believe? Do we have more control than we think? If you listen to the rest of this podcast, you might come away with a different idea of what healing is, of where to find it. And as Louise L. Hay said, of the agency and ingenuity that you have in healing yourself and your life. All right, hello everybody in Suckville. Today my guest is named Thorfin, formerly known as John Caldwell. He was born in Scotland and later immigrated to Canada. He studied outdoor education with a specialization as a survival instructor.
Yeah, I've had the good fortune of doing lots of very interesting things. I think in the early days, I used to think I was unfortunate. I used to feel very sorry about myself and about having a very poor life or a very hard life. But it's actually paid off in the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, what do they say? The best stuff in life is never easy, something like that.
Yeah.
So where you grew up in Scotland?
Yeah, I was right? Born in Irvine, Scotland. It's on the west coast, into a very poor sort of situation. My mother and father were alcoholics. They had real trouble. My mother had me when she was 15 years old, and she had 8 children in the end. So it was a very sort of tough scene. My father beat me till they put me in an orphanage. The social services put me in an orphanage. So that's sort of how it started out, in Scotland. So yeah,
you got a pretty rough childhood there, friend.
Yeah. That put me down a very specific road, in terms of a path. Right?
What road did it put you down?
The orphanage was quite tough. So I realized quite quickly that I had to toughen up. So I became very much curious about what that was. So I became a warrior. I actually joined as a boy soldier at 16 years old. I joined the British Parachute Regiment, which is a fairly elite unit in Britain. I learned to be tough. Like I became an unarmed combat instructor and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
What happened after that section of your life?
Well, that was being a warrior was a large part. I did I wandered with that. I was in the French Foreign Legion. I ended up emigrating to Canada, and I went to university. Things weren't really working good for me, so I actually ended up joining the Canadian military as well, because that was something I was very familiar with, right? So, and then I finished up my career with the Canadian military with special operations. I served in Bosnia and Afghanistan, and I ended up as a yacht master. I went to the Navy and I learned to sail. So I had a very very intense sort of military trajectory that was very, very, very detailed, very sort of full of all kinds of bizarre opportunities,
So you said you went into the British parish when you were about 16, right?
Yeah, that'd be 79, in 1979. And then I emigrated in 89. I ended up serving until 2017 when I retired. my retirement plan was a sailing expedition. So that's what sort of led, that whole journey led to, I had friends who died in Afghanistan. So, for me, the mission was to bring a voice to veterans issues. And my idea of self-actualization, to be the best human being I could be, knowing that my friends had sacrificed themselves, was to try and cross the Atlantic and single-handed and be the first Canadian to do that, and it seemed like such a beautiful sort of gem of a thing to do.
So you didn't want to just take like a road trip or something. It had to be like a boat voyage.
No. Now the people that sort of work out the stuff in the stars, they're starting to tell me that that's not what's in my chart. No, it's not. No, everything in mine is always epic. I'm hoping for less epic.
Are you hoping to settle down a little bit and be less epic?
That's
then?
what I'm practicing. I'm practicing being less epic. Yeah.
There's a first time for everything.
I was very much a kind of type A personality, a kind of goal orientated, very, very good at that, very effective achiever. I was always trying to achieve and be worthy, which was what that was about for me. That's what led to the sailing expedition, which is where I had my. I mean, I had lots of little trauma through life, which I'd managed to deal with, because I'd been trained to deal with trauma. I was very good at it. But the ocean thing, I attempted to cross the ocean, and then basically it went terribly bad.
So lead me through a little bit of that story. So you're in Canada at this point, right? When you decide that you want to sail across the Atlantic.
Yeah, I retired.
But still dealing with quite a bit of trauma from your last experiences, I would imagine.
I didn't realize that that's what it was. I spent 5 years preparing the boat. I became a yacht master in 3 different systems. I really put some intention into it and work into it and intensity. And I prepared as best I could with some of the best sailors. I built the expedition boat with my friend George Pike. He's a boat builder, and he's a veteran. And I'd scrounged up all the bits and pieces I could to operate in that sort of thing. You have to have a fairly decent vessel.
And what kind of a vessel was it?
It was an Albin Vega. It's a little 27-foot sailboat.
So is it kind of vintage then?
Yeah. The Jester Challenge is a race that goes from Plymouth, England to Newport, Rhode Island, and it was invented by a British special operations guy by the name of Blondie Hassler. He's a Marine-like type. I was always a paratrooper, so there's not many paratroopers do this type of stuff. It's mostly Marines. He had served in the war, and he was quite a special guy, quite fearless, and he had sailed a small boat very similar to that in the very first Jester Challenge. He created the Jester Challenge, so I was very intrigued by that.
I would not even know where to start. Like, boat? I guess that's a boat.
Yeah, it took a lot of attention, took a lot of preparation and stuff like that. But it was so quickly wiped away. And I was getting a new beta engine put in the boat to get a brand new engine put in, and the mechanic was late. So that put me to a delayed start to the end of June. I actually set sail on the 29th of June. The interesting thing is the British O-Star had come from Britain to America and got totally trashed. About 7 skippers got pulled from the sea. So I knew that the conditions were really bad this year. And so I sat there and waited a week or two after that to get the courage to go, basically. So I set sail from this fishing village Prospect. And of course, it was tough. The first 4 days were actually terrible. I got behind Sable Island. I got kicked about really badly. It was the weather was treacherous out there. Sable is where we have shallow land and deep sea come together, and so the seas can be particularly vicious there.
Okay.
And of course, it's an island, and there's other obstacles like oil rigs and stuff. So to be caught in a storm off of that was the first 4 days were horrible, to the point where I sort of had my first collapse, which was in my first what people would call third person.
What does that mean?
I had a vision of the Virgin Mary, and she told me I'd always been loved.
Really?
Which I took as a positive thing. So, and then things got better. So I got back up and kept sailing. And it went like this. This was the pattern for the expedition. I go about 4 or 5 days, and something would happen. A sail would blow out, or another storm would roll through, and so it was tough. It was a tough trip. I had people who would give me weather information and navigation information, and they told me there was a serious one coming.
Oh no! Like what kind of serious?
Well, in a 27-foot boat, it doesn't take much to be serious, but these were like 65, 85 knot winds, which was treacherous for me. It was, even though I had prepared the boat very well, I'd reduced the sail as much as I dare. I was still being overpowered, and when I'd ride across the crests of the waves during the storm, I get blown so badly, I would try and trip the boat up, which was very unnerving. And then when this happened enough times, I realized I was in trouble, so I put out my parachute anchor.
And what is a parachute anchor for those of us who are completely clueless?
Yes, it's just a big parachute. It's a big parachute that's in the water, and basically it points the boat into the wave action. It's a very rough ride, but it's safe. You don't go anywhere. You ride with a wave train, and it's a safe way to be during a storm. It takes all the inertia out of what's happening, even though it's rough.
Okay.
For the boat. It makes it safe. Okay. I believed.
Dun dun dun. How many days had you been at sea at this point?
I'd been at 20. I was absolutely halfway across. I was 2,000 some odd miles out. I was well prepared, but I wasn't prepared for how it went down. It was quite shocking to transform from a sort of expedition stance to a sort of survival stance. It was quite quick, as these things are, right? So basically, once I put my parachute anchor out, I had a satellite phone, so I phoned my base and I told them I was fine. And I was for about 2 or 3 hours, actually. I tried to eat, but I was so seasick I couldn't eat. It was like living in a washer. It was very bad. And then I tried to sleep, and I couldn't sleep because the sound through the rigging was horrific. Yeah, it was quite uncomfortable. And then I rolled. Something took me from the starboard side, rolled me 360 degrees, and I knew that the whole boat had gone over. I felt it. Everything fell apart. Just stuff went everywhere. I ended up with water inside. And so what I thought had happened was that my parachute anchor had snapped away. So I had 4. I had extra. So I thought, oh, that's what's happened. I'm going to have to go put another parachute anchor out. So I got dressed in my survival suit and harness because I couldn't go out on deck without it. But when I went on deck, I realized the mast was gone. So it snapped right off.
No.
And it was worse than that. It was actually dangling on the side, and the thing was putting a hole in the boat. So it was actually a hole in the boat. I had to cut it away, which was very difficult. And I had a lot of water in the boat, and I realized the pumps weren't working. So I did a lot of manual bailing whilst trying to cut away, whilst trying to deal with the holes. And then I realized I was in a survival situation. So I readied my life raft. I had a life raft. So I flashed it up and got I had a go bag, which had thousands of dollars worth of specialized survival gear. Water makers and GPSs and rations enough to take me to China, which sank with the boat. So all this gear, I couldn't fix the flood. The boat was sinking, and then the life raft ripped away, and then that's when I signaled for help.
That's when you signaled for help? You're a tough cookie, man.
I still had an engine. The Azores were only 600 miles away. If I could get the wires out of the ropes out of the water, I could motor. The holes were not so huge if I could get it under control. Yeah. But they were below the waterline, so I had problems. But I still felt like I was sort of dealing with it or trying to deal with it. I look up and the Hung Singapore arrived, which is a huge car carrier from Halifax manned by 20 Chinese. Who have no clue about how to conduct a rescue at sea. They're all young guys who totally culturally sort of different. That was a disaster. They were the most dangerous thing in the water. The ship actually sank my boat. And he ran down the first time and cracked the hull, and I was screaming to get away. And the second time they run down there, they went over my para anchor, and they destroyed the boat. And I was able to get out. They had a ladder, and I was able to get onto this ladder. These Chinese kids dragged me off to a cabin, and I lay down. I was out of it for about 2 or 3 days, and I had the most bizarre spiritual experience, kind of like melting of my mind. It was quite profound.
I think it was just from like shock.
With 7 or 8 hours of real trauma, that amount of cortisol, particularly with fight or flight, the adrenaline, it does a lot of damage to the brain. So that was part of the, but it manifests to me as like a non-dual experience. I actually sort of felt myself being part of everything, sort of, like actually melting as a in terms of consciousness. So it changed my life.
Yeah, I would say that this entire experience would really change anyone's life. This is not everybody has a story like this, Thorfin.
When I first got out, I was really manic, really high, really low. And the story, the narrative of it was very important. I used to, like that was part of my mania, because it was quite liberating. Like it changed. When I say it changed my life, I had a relationship for 28 years that ended. It's been it's had an effect on my children for sure. I have 4 kids. Luckily they're older, but this sort of thing has an effect on people, right? And
What do you mean when you said that it was liberating?
I don't know how it is for other people in their trauma, but when you get that close to death, for me, it was a sense of that everything. I see everything with a magic clarity, with a new intensity, with a new appetite.
And would you say that, like, in a way that you're grateful to have had that experience then?
Yeah, because it provoked the healing journey, which is what I've been on for since it happened. It's magic. I can point to all kinds of beautiful magic. It's been very interesting, and I feel blessed for having gone through it. I actually, not everybody gets to be cracked open and get to look at yourself again. It's like being born again for sure.
Yeah, that had to be pretty insane. Yeah, so you were saying it was very liberating, and it also changed a lot of things.
Yeah. My actually, it was the relationship to myself changed, right? So I don't know how it is again for other people, but for me, when I went through that, I really had to sort of try and figure out who I was and what I was doing, and for me, I realized I didn't really have genuine connection, genuine relationships. I didn't really understand, what that was. I was very oblivious to it. I'd learned how to armor myself and how to be very masculine energy. When I had this sort of brain melt thing, everything sort of melted. I had to come back and I had questions about my own gender, about how I felt about who I was as a human being. Like it was on every level.
What were the emotions kind of attached to that experience?
That's what I begin to notice is we generate these triggers, right? So we realize that the triggers come with a flood of emotion. What it's generated for me is a view that an understanding that, okay, I have to operate now as a human being, having survived that trauma. I have to realize that I am affected, and that I need to act accordingly.
What do you mean by that?
The guys from my special operations unit sent me a book by Lawrence Gonzalez on surviving trauma. Right away, I was reading a lot of the science and stuff. They say if you experience some type of severe trauma, you're 60% likely to get have a heart attack or have anything more severe, and your immune system is often depressed. There's knock-on or long-term effects of your trauma that you don't realize, right?
Yeah, because it stays in your body. Your body remembers it.
You go manipulate your connective tissue, and you're going to find out that your trauma, all those things that are in there, right? So the curiosity took me to a place of, well, okay, so how do I counter that? How do I, having nearly died, and how does one come back and restore, after being diagnosed with the PTSD and the depression and all the other stuff? I'd gone to there's a society in town for non-duality, and I'd gone there and asked them what that was all about. And these are people who were trying to express it to the world. They see themselves as both being separate to the world and part of the world. And when I asked them about meditation, they pointed to the Shambhala Center, so in Halifax. So I started meditating, and I discovered Chogyam Trungpa, who is a crazy wisdom master who escaped and evaded the Chinese over the Tibetan mountains to bring Buddhism to the West. It's this absolute wonderful person with these beautiful teachings. And of course, he was mad as a hacker. He had PTSD and he survived like physical trauma and everything. So it seemed to fit right in with who I was, right? So,
like finding a kindred soul.
Yeah. So the Buddhist thing was a very soft place to land. They were either messed up people or people who were busy healing messed up people. So it was a very nice community. And that's where I met my partner. She's a homeopath. So I started getting sort of hints from the universe that I should be looking at more natural healing things, right?
So what did natural healing end up meaning for you then?
Anybody who's gone crazy, I'd say start with meditation, because it's good to have a relationship with your breath.
And what is the breath practice?
Misogi. It's samurai used to do it for thousands of years for training the mind for pain and combat. Right. So I started there. That's what I knew. Like, okay, what's this breathing malarkey? What's this cold water breathing malarkey?
Exactly.
And I met my partner, and I'd said to her that I didn't really understand about relating to people and or connection, and she looked me in the eyes and said, "Well, have you heard about orgasmic meditation?" There was it's a whole sensuality thing coined by Nicole Dodon, who is Julie is someone who's interested in our sensuality and our understanding of sensuality.
Yeah, Julie is helping people with like couples therapy and sensuality.
Yeah. So the first place to start, we own our own bliss. Our own happiness is our own body, right? So I'd spent my whole life being armored. So I didn't understand what sensual meant. Yeah. So me and my partner, our first foray was to Lafayette Morehouse, which is a collective community who focuses specifically on couples communication, sensuality, like all these types of things. So that was my first natural healing.
Yeah, cool.
Whatever that is, right?
How did you come out of this experience? Did it crack your mind open even more?
Yeah. I was such a philistine before, I had no idea what was available. I had no idea. But yeah, it gave me a mindset too about, owning my own happiness.
And what does that mean to you, like taking responsibility for your own happiness?
We often, and this shows up in a lot of triggers, right? When we get triggered, we're often like our first go to is because we got very good at being triggered and defensive. Is our first go to is usually defensive, and then it's usually blame, right? We kind of blame the world, or we blame other people, or we blame usually our partners or the nearest thing to us, right? For our, that's usually our first go to as human beings is to sort of think, shit, this is happening to me because of this. And it took that away. I'm responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for being clear and honest about who I am.
An incredible discovery, life-changing discovery.
Yeah. I look at people differently now. I look at couples differently. Like even the great lamas, the great enlightened ones, all have trouble with relationship. It's the most interesting place for us as human beings is how we relate to each other, right? So it's a very useful education, because when we get that part of our mandala right, then everything else is easy.
I'm so happy for you. Such a cool experience that you actually ended up
Yeah.
falling into.
Now, and I put that. I mean, it's not to dismiss or diminish any of the other experiences. I did a lot of sacred plant medicine.
I mean, I'm familiar with sacred plants, but maybe some other people out there are not. So, what do you mean by sacred plants?
Well, okay, so for me, I came to it quite ignorant too. I didn't really understand. Some of the veterans were using cannabis for the PTSD and stuff. So, it was a natural choice as opposed to drugs. And I was kind of curious about that. And then I heard of some veterans using, the first one I heard was ibogaine. It's a vine plant that's grown in Gabon, Africa. And they combine this in some way, and they treat it in some way. It's supposed to be the most powerful detox on the planet, and used for trauma, for people who have serious addictions, useful for people who have, psychological problems.
And so, were you using this kind of in that same period when you met your partner to deal with some residual traumas?
Yeah. I've been taking a journey through the different plant medicines. That's just that ibogaine. I also experimented with ayahuasca and psilocybin and the other things that are available for people for this. So I've done a very thorough sort of and curious walk through. My curiosity tends to be focused on the culture, the Shipibo or the the Boeti, or because I seem to learn a lot more by connecting with the indigenous people and the use of these types of medicines. So it's been very, very connective for me in that way.
And how is that kind of healing journey with the sacred plants? How has it helped you to deal with some of your past trauma?
Well, iboga is very powerful, but I did quite a few journeys with the ayahuasca, and ayahuasca is one of those plant. What the type of sort of thing that seemed to happen with me with the medicine would be it would really shove it in your face what's going on. If you have trauma, it will bring it up, and you will deal with it, and you'll purge it, and so it's in that way. I always sort of caution would be trauma people, experiment with this stuff that it can be re-traumatizing. It can be quite vivid. It can be quite intense.
There's a lot of preparation that goes into like these ceremonies too. I know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's about that background, your diet and stuff is very important. Your state of mind, your setting is very important. How you approach it, as a sacred thing is very important.
Yeah, it's not like going to the club and taking ecstasy.
No, no, no. That's why I recommend the cold water stuff first, or the working in your garden, or stuff like that for people who are kind of curious. But and if people are interested in that, they should really look into it and spend some time working out what that is for themselves, right?
So probably anything that offers somebody a bit of grounding, makes them feel grounded.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I built a sauna, so the sweat, this heat and cold, and like you say, like anything that manipulates your connective tissue is really good. And like I say, I just finished sweat lodges and fasting and that was a very profound healing experience to work with a community, which is a more connective way. I find that the more we can be involved with people, and have people involved in our healing, the more interesting that is, right? To be vulnerable in community seems to be part of what it is, right?
Yeah, I think community is a big key.
And then it's interesting what shows up. So what shows up is I've got a community around me of people who are either psychologists, or psychiatrists, or people who have experienced some plant medicines or have experienced different, intersect in different ways. Veterans who have injuries, or like people like Julie. So I get to be at the sort of roundabout or the watering hole of a lot of interesting sort of, people who bring their own curiosity to what is trauma and how do we deal with it, right? And have their own answers. So it's things like music. I really love music. I do music now. And
Thinking back to like your childhood and the way that your path that you were on, you said you were put on a pretty specific path as a child. Would you have ever imagined that you would end up in Canada living this kind of a life?
no, that's what showed up was actually, it's much more interesting, right? It was much bigger than I could ever imagine. That's for sure. And the gifts that have come out of it have been, it's just been extraordinary. So that's where I'm at, is just trying to acknowledge the extraordinariness and the gifts that I have and enjoy it while we got this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being grateful for them,
Yeah.
right?
I study this Tibetan Lama, Dr. Nida, and he says we're all potatoes. He said, and he's pretty right. We're all pretty stupid. We're all, we really are not that sophisticated when it comes to these things. But it's been helpful. It's been helpful with the COVID thing too, because I have a very specific health situation. I had 2 pericardial infections with my trauma very early on in my trauma. So I was unvaccinated, and I joined the bloody ranks of the unvaccinated very quickly. So it was without option or choice, right? But
You couldn't get vaccinated, like you weren't able to.
no, no, no. My father had blood clots and stuff, so
Okay.
so it's been very interesting negotiating social situations now, like in how things are changing in Canada. But luckily, I have the fortitude of having done all this work. As hard as it is, we're able to get through it,
Yeah.
right?
Do you have any advice for anybody maybe that's like, in the thick of trauma right now? And because there's a lot of people going through a lot of trauma, I think, after this pandemic.
Yeah. People got to experience, this weird existential threat to life, something out there lurking, some sort of mysterious enemy. That's something that's very familiar when you walk on a patrol in Afghanistan with a rifle in your hand. You know what I mean? There's a sense of death is in the air. There's a sense of, there's a constant pressure from that, and a constant sort of vigilance that we sort of bring to our situation. I can see lots of people being traumatized by this, or enhancing and multiplying the trauma. The simplest thing I've learned from all this is nature. Nature is healing. We're naturally healing. Anything that's natural is a gift. The sun doesn't charge you for being beautiful and hot and giving you vitamin D. It just shines on you. This abundance of connectedness, that you get from a garden, or this intricacy in sort of interrelationship you have when you've experienced plant consciousness, or anything that's as expanding as that. Be curious about yourself, because we're not. We give up on our happiness, we give up on our pleasure, we give up on all these things very quickly to conform, or to get the work done, or it's too much trouble. We don't have time, that sort of thing. That's all I'd say.
I think curiosity is another one of the keys.
Yeah.
So I actually really love this
Stay
podcast
creative.
because I'm very naturally curious about other people and their stories. So
it's a curious thing you do. I think it's useful. I think it's really wonderful, and I think that in itself is helpful for people. You find this a lot with any of the medicines. It's the integration. It's listening to other people's visions or understandings or experiences of these things, and it might not be the same as yours, but it's informative. All these things seem to have a meaning and a purpose, right? So
I feel very fortunate that I can peel back some of these layers on normal people like you and me that have really incredible stories.
Ordinary magic. It's just ordinary magic.
I love it. How to make ordinary magic with Thorfin. Talked about your name journey before that we started recording, but will you just tell it one more time? How did you end up being Thorfin?
Well, I like I say, I was a soldier most of my life, so security was always an issue, especially when I worked, more secure units or elite units. So you don't really want your name on social media. So Thorfin Skullcrusher was an Earl of Orkney, and I knew about this character historically, so it just seemed like a good name.
It's a badass name.
Well, my sailboat was called Fenrir, which is a wolf that kills Odin at the end of the times. But anyway, there's a whole Viking theme to the sailing expedition, so some southern node sort of karmic thing going on there. I didn't think much of it until after my accident, when I met my friend, my partner now. She's Chinese German, so she didn't really pick up language wise what I was trying to give her, which was my Facebook contact, which was all I had at the time. And she'd explained, so everybody she met, she told them that was my name, and that's who I became.
So then it was pretty hard to go back and be like, no, actually, I'm John. What?
No, that doesn't work. So now I have this life where I have people will come up to me. I had a guy come up to me the other day. He's like, "Are you Indigenous?" And I'm like, "Aren't we all?" Which planet you from? I don't know. So it's a lovely interaction. In my sweat lodge prayer, I'm Thorfin of the Muckpole clan, a genuine-hearted warrior, a seed seeking the light. So that's what comes up. It's like,
what more could you want?
So the whole post-trauma thing has been becoming something, just being more of who I am. Right?
Mm-hmm. Kudos, major kudos. You've had a really crazy journey, but you're a delightful human. I can tell.
Yeah.
All the way through this camera.
Likewise.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Follow Live from Suckville on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. If you'd like to thank someone or be on a future show, you can send me an email at livefromsuckville@gmail.com or type Live from Suckville into your Google search engine and record me a message directly on the site. A special thanks to all my guests and to Chris Kirby for the amazing theme music. This episode was recorded in my kitchen and produced by yours truly. Until next time.